Here are 5 ways to improve your guitar tones when using a digital modeler. Number 1. Noise suppression. So digital modelers such as the Quad Cortex don't have a native noise suppressor function. However, they do use noise gates, and we can use the noise gate in a particular way to have the same effect as a noise suppressor. So here in Cortex Control with this JCM800 Live preset example, you can see that before we hit any blocks, we've actually split the signal using a splitter, and we're applied a crossover type. So in your digital modeler, if you have the ability to split certain frequencies to different lanes, that's what you want to do. And in this example, I've just set it so that anything over 1677 Hz goes to this second lane, and everything under that frequency will continue through to the row 1 to the other blocks as normal. Now, what this is going to do is that it's going to isolate your particular problematic frequencies where noise is coming from, and we're going to apply an adaptive utility gate in the Quad Cortex with the noise reduction set to 0, as we don't actually need to apply any particular percentage. Just having this active on those particular frequencies is going to control the noise in the background. Here's some before and afters so you can hear the difference with just enabling this adaptive gate. I found there's quite a lot of interference going on, and this really helps control that interference level in your signal if you're not in a super clean environment. Now, the number I arrived on for this particular frequency was a little bit of trial and error, and what I suggest is listening to your particular signal on your particular preset that you're concerned about in terms of noise, and just experimenting with this frequency level until you find something which is about right for removing the appropriate level of noise without messing up the sound too much. Because if you are too aggressive with the frequency here, you're going to find that there is some weird roll off when you sustain notes and chords. So you need to experiment to see what works. 2. Chug control. So on some digital modelers, you don't have the option for a multi-band compressor. However, there are some tricks you can do to achieve a similar effect with the built-in blocks. Now, before I run through this particular example, I want to give a shout out to Paul Bradshaw, where I was inspired to do this tip from. So I'll leave a link down below in the description where you can check out the full detailed video where he goes through this exact setup. But essentially what we're doing is we're splitting the signal after all the blocks and before the output. And we're using the crossover type splitter again. So it really shows you how useful and flexible this splitter type can be. And what we're doing is we're inverting the mode this time instead of using the regular, which means that instead of all the signal above the frequency we specify going to the lower lane, we are sending everything below that frequency. So in this case, we're sending everything below 310 into this row 4, and we are adding a solid state compressor. And so what this is going to do is it's going to add some dynamic gain reduction on all those low end frequencies when we do a chug. And of course, because it's a compressor, the harder we push it, the more work it's going to do. So it's dynamic to your playing, and it's not just purely a case of sweeping out a load of EQ no matter how hard or dynamic you are playing. As Paul mentioned in his video, he suggests put the ratio around 2 or 4 and really play with the threshold in particular. Based on the particular tunings you use, the amp you use, it will vary slightly depending on your play style as well. So you will need to experiment a bit with this, but I would suggest just adjusting the threshold as you're chugging away and to see at what particular levels things tighten up and that low end rumble is removed as much as you want it to be. How to dial in any amp. I remember watching That Pedal Show with Mick and Dan a good while ago, and one trick that Matt Schofield presented on that particular episode was how to dial in any amp, and it's really stuck with me ever since. Now what Matt suggests is to go through all the EQ, so bass, middle and treble, and quickly adjust the dial. Play with dynamics. Digital modeling makes it easier than ever to really focus on particular gain stages with preset scenes, so you just do a foot dance to change the dynamic nature of your guitar tone. However, setting up your guitar amps in your digital modeler to allow a lot of dynamic range with just your guitar without adjusting anything in the modeler is a really powerful way to take your tones to the next level. So using the JCM 800 Live preset that we used a bit earlier for another example, I've got the amp set up so that the master is pushed reasonably high, but the gain is at 4, so it's not pushing it too hard. And here's what it sounds like on the neck humbucker pickup on this guitar, where I'm just playing dynamically with my fingers and adjusting the volume pot just slightly from being fully turned up to around 80%. So I really like dialing in amps just at the point where the dynamics remain and it's not impossible to clean up your tone with your volume pot or pickup selection to transfer from a clean tone to a gainy sound. I think it really adds an extra layer to your playing, and at least with me, I find it gives me the capacity to be a bit more expressive with my playing and not just rely on the effects in front of me. Pre and post amp EQ. In one of my earlier videos about how to cut through the mix on the Quad Cortex, I talked about using EQ to push the mid frequencies before an amp and then cutting them afterwards, so you don't have a nasally honky sound but you're still cutting through the mix with those extra mid harmonics going into the amp. And with this trick we're going to apply something similar, however we're going to do it with the bass frequencies so that if you're playing a heavier sort of tone, it's going to really tighten up your playing. So this was a trick I picked up a couple of years ago from a YouTuber called Mad Steaks. And this is a well-known studio trick, I think, in terms of cutting the EQ at the DI level and then integrating those frequencies back in after the amplifier. So that's going to control the boominess of a particular tone. And importantly, if you're playing on the neck pickup and playing higher up on the 10th or 12th fret, you're going to find that the buzzing, the boominess is going to really be reduced by doing this trick. So all we've done is applied a low shelf at 200 Hertz roughly, of minus 12 dB, and then controlled the rest of the curve by adding a minus 1.8 decibel gain reduction at 468 Hertz, and then bringing that back to the 0 gain value at around 683 Hz. Now these aren't exact numbers, and as I said, you can adjust these for your particular tuning and your guitar tones. And then after the amp, we want to apply another parametric 8 EQ, but add some of that bass back into the signal so we're not losing that nice rich bottom end. So what we've done here is we've added a low shelf at around 312 Hz and boosted that by around 3 decibels. Again, play with these values to see what works for your particular setup. And then we've kept the next value at 500 Hz at 0 gain to go back to a flat EQ curve thereafter. And here's some examples of what it sounds like without these EQ blocks enabled and then with the EQ blocks enabled. So there were my 5 ways to improve your guitar tone with your digital modeler, and we already covered the 3 main themes of noise, proper practices in EQ, and dynamics. If you found any of those tips useful at all, please make sure to leave a like on the video and click hype if you see the option, which is a way to boost this video up the algorithm from Google, and also subscribe if you're not subscribed already. It really helps grow the channel as well. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.